Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Trekyards. I'm Captain Foley.
And I'm Commander Cognizant Stewart. We got a new room! We got a new room!
Yes, we did. Today we're going to be talking about the lower decks, the Cerritos, more specifically, engine room that we saw in episode 2 of Lower Decks. And, it's a warp core. It's kind of a little bit different than some warp cores we've seen, but it is worth looking at and talking about. So, let's get into it.
And disclaimer, we did see a chunk of it in the first episode, and also in the next time on with the coral. Clearly is the same room, just a bit destroyed. And to note, we have not seen the engine room in Picard because there's no engine room, there's an engine wall. Doesn't look like a warp core. We've not seen the Discovery engine room yet, so that can't be anything. So the last engine room we actually saw was in Nemesis with the Enterprise Z. So it's been a long time since we've actually seen a warp core, and I know that's like, whoa. Well, I guess we saw the Enterprise one in the short trek, and it was awful. It was the size of a small football stadium, and it was absolutely awful. I mean, it looked cool, but it was stupid. It had little drones flying around the side. Like, what were they thinking? Now, that said, this is also pretty big. But what do you think of this warp core and just remember, the Cerritos is a low-end ship, low-end mission, low-end crew, no, like, flagship, Cerritos, freighter, bottom tier. What do you think, and what was your reaction from this close-up, or wide shot, I mean?
It surprises me quite a bit. This seems very, very large, especially for a smaller ship. It seems almost like something that you'd see in a star base.
Yeah, I could see that.
It definitely has a beefy feel to it. It's quite a large engineering deck, very similar to Voyager in its layout. And you got the upper deck there as well with the railings and stuff. So there's a lot going on here. And I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. I mean, it is cool looking. I do like the little tables they've got. They don't have the big pool table, as they call it in the middle. They've got smaller ones, which look great. And some nice Alcars, of course, nice displays. But, yeah, it seems a little too big for a ship like this, especially considering this ship's probably about half the size of a Galaxy class.
Yeah.
Now,
if I'd said to you, if we'd seen this a year ago and this was the USS Discovery engineering room, what would you have thought?
I would have been on board with it because, with an experimental ship, bigger warp core, would be neat. Of course, you have to change the Alcars, obviously, to floaty hologram displays to be Discovery here. But for the size, I would buy it more. Like I said, to me, this feels more like something you'd see on a starbase or like an outpost of sorts, not necessarily a starship. It feels wrong. The shapes aren't standard warp core shapes, really. You got the tubes going around, and then the long ones out the side, and it just, I was going to say, it doesn't really resemble anything we've seen so far, but yet at the same time, when you look at it, you know exactly what it is as a Star Trek fan. So it's kind of got that unique feel, but I don't know how I really feel about it.
It's not a good-looking room, clearly. It's definitely a weird one. The size, you can take in a couple of ways. One, that's just new Trek. Bigger for no reason, because bigger is better scale to film in, and yet all the other shots are close-ups where we just get to see some people. Like, the scale doesn't add anything. In fact, it makes it look silly. That said, other option is that if this is a low-end ship, maybe it was given a low-end warp core, and so it needs a bigger core to create the same power. But then you ask, why didn't it just have a core that's an efficient one? I mean, runabouts can have warp, It seems odd to be that giant. We can see a dude. I mean, in the Enterprise D one, it does go under the floor and above the guy, but the center bit is right in the middle, which you can literally walk to, and it's a little door you can open, and you can already see the guy. The guy is almost the entire size of that middle bit. So the scale is absolutely massive, and it's also cavernous. That said, if you look at the Enterprise E, engineering, which was the first. Okay, so the engineering for TOS was limited by the room size. TMP, they went big, and it is really big, and it's got the long bit that sticks out, which looks a bit daft now, I think, in retrospect. Like, why is it so big? That set was then reused for everything until the Enterprise E. Modified. So we've got very similar, this is how big engineering rooms would be. Engineering core itself is still huge. But then again, the Enterprise E, especially the first contact version, where they were like, hey, budget, scale, big. And obviously in First Contact we spend a lot of time in the room at the end, so it makes sense. It's like a 3-floor thing. It is cavernous. So in a similar way, cavernous. We didn't think much of it then. I know in Insurrection and Nemesis they built it at 2/3 scale because they didn't need to build full size and you couldn't really tell. But it is absolutely ginormous. There's a great Ex Scientifica of the whole room. And it probably about the same scale, give or take, just the warp core's neater. But if it's newer, makes sense. But it's such a small ship, and this is using up a ton of its space. And you obviously can't repair it as easily because it's. I don't know. What do you think now I've said all that stuff compared to the E, which is cavernous and?
Again, the E is a bigger ship, and it's also a battleship. This one doesn't have the comfort look that the Galaxy class does. I mean, the Galaxy class one, has nice carpeted floors and the subtle muted beiges and stuff on the walls. This one is very much what you think an engine room would be. It's kind of down in the bowels of the ship, and it's got the gray look. It feels darker. It feels more like something utilitarian, which is fine. I mean, like I said, it's very similar to Voyager's,
which is good. I like that.
Yeah. Exactly.
But in this last view where they're all standing, shouting for the guy, you can see that 4 people take up less than half of the middle bit. That's easily 15, 10, 12 people wide. I mean, it is absurdly... Like I say, this is the starbase size. I mean, think about it. The Defiant's warp core is tiny. The room is tiny. It can go warp 9.9 something. You can build warp cores that tiny. This is either an incredibly inefficient one or try to make a weird statement of oh look, warp core. And they don't even use the space for cool filming. I would get it if it was huge and they wanted these really cool pan shots of... But yeah, it's definitely too big. I mean, a good 40% too big probably.
Easily, yeah.
There's no form follows function. These panels in the middle are an entire thing away, whereas on the Enterprise D, there's the middle panel, and you can do a turn and a step. Touch the side buttons. Turn the step. More buttons. This. Right. Jerry! Press the red one! Thanks, mate! You know what I mean? It's absolutely oversized. I think the more we're talking about it, the more we'll come to that conclusion. And while you understand it, Starbase. This is a Starbase. So why is a Starbase warp core inside a small...
And the thing is, we also don't know where this is necessarily. Is this in the center pod between the nacelles? Because that center pod would only be probably 3 decks high anyway. So if this is just what's in that pod, and it's taking up the 3 or 4 decks, that would be that pod height. Again, I don't know how I feel about that. A lot of people have complained that the pod is between the nacelles, but we kind of looked at the MSD a little bit, and we couldn't see anything that looked very much like a warp core.
So here we have the MSD, Stuart, just to remind ourselves. And it was confirmed that the yellow things with lines are the turbolifts. So they can't be warp cores. So, warp core? Big old 3-deck warp core.
It looks like it could be in the pod there near the rear of the pod. There's a big cylindrical thing with things coming off the sides of it. Because, I mean, other than that, you got the main computer core in the center of the saucer, as is always the case.
Yeah, you would think they would design it to be in the ship. I mean, it may be, because it's got stuff pointing out, but it doesn't...
And it's worth pointing out here to everybody that's skeptical about the pod between the nacelles, as you can see here, the pod is above the nacelles. Slightly. And then the struts would go down towards it, which is fine. No problem there.
I mean, I don't see the room, I'll be honest. None of these rooms... You would not miss this room, and you would absolutely show the engineering on an MSD. And extreme amount of detail in this. I guess they hadn't designed it yet, and therefore didn't include it? Because it's a 3-story room, and those engineering rooms tend to pop. Like, when you have MSDs, oh, there it is.
I don't know. Anyway, it's big. It's damn big, and it's got a unique design too. Like I said, from other warp cores we've seen, but it's still very visually a warp core, which I like.
It's close, but not close enough potentially.
Yeah, I mean that's engineering for the Cerritos guys.
Yeah, I mean better than it could be, worse than it could be.
Did you notice it's different though than what we saw in episode 1? Not the warp core itself, but the room. Because when we saw the other view of the room, there was the big MSD on the wall on the left, which we can't really see that wall in these shots. So I guess it could still be there.
The room does feel different. It does feel bigger and more.
Yeah, it does definitely feel different. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out.
But hey, they get BATNet's perfect and Shuttle's Type 6 is perfect, so, you know, hey-ho. And maybe we can ask them one day, why is your engineering room as big as a Sovereign while being a third of the size of a Sovereign?
Maybe we'll get an explanation somewhere in the show as well. So, anyway, guys, what do you guys think of this design? Is it too big? Is it just big enough? Where do you think it is on the ship? All those are great discussions to have, so put them down in the comment section. We love reading them, and we love you guys interacting with each other. We got a great community here, and as such, we do lives every week. So if you want to be part of those, by all means, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you get notified when we do our lives, when we upload our regular videos as well. So another way to make sure that happens is click the all bell notification icon so you get notified every time, hopefully.
Yeah, not that it works every time, but we'd like to think it works most times. But if you do, guys, we do lives at the same time every time, pretty much, almost every time. So 5 p.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. GMT, that's a good time. The lives you can super chat, that supports the channel directly, because being here is amazing, obviously, but supporting us directly is even more amazing because we need those finances to allow us to do the show, to stop us from doing other work, etc., etc. But what other ways can people support except the super chat lives?
Well, they can join Patreon/Trekyards. They can join the channel at the rank of Commander, Captain, or Admiral. And they can also check out the links down below. There's lots of links to various things like our Teespring store and just other ways to support us. So check it out. And, of course, the most important way to help us, guys, is hit that like button. The thumbs up is really important. Good analytic for YouTube and helps out the channel. So if you can, please do.
Yeah, and just join in next time.
Yeah. So until then, I'm Captain Foley.
I'm Connor Guns. Bye, guys.
See ya.